Hello, everybody. Be welcome. I'm Vitor Pordeus, and I'm here to present this introduction to theater and psychiatry and medicine, and making a historical review of the main experiences that inform our clinical and theatrical practice in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. This is a room from the Madness Hotel that I will explain a little bit later. And this is part of the 32nd Summer School of Cultural Psychiatry from the Division of Social and Transcultural Psychiatry of McGill University, the Art and Healing Workshop. Well, this starts, it starts with hominid co-evolution, which is the evolutionary process that has brought us to be who we are. We are descendants of a primate lineage of bipedal primates that have evolved in Africa in the last 3.5 million years ago. And that's what helps us to understand and explain scientifically how we have evolved from primate societies and primate cultures that are absolutely molding our work and our evolution and our emotions. And one of the most striking facts of primate evolution is that big primates in the last 20 million years, 60 million years, have been manipulating herbal medicine, and they know medicinal leaves and medicinal herbs from the jungle. They use it for skin regeneration, and this is also seen in elephants. It's been described in elephants, it's been described in birds that use leaves and plants as skin regeneration in birth, labor, and all medicinal processes. So medicine is a primate inheritance. It's a primate patrimony, and that's something that helps us to understand a lot human nature and why we are how we are. Another scientific description about emotions and mimics and laughing and clapping, how big primates also laugh, also clap, and also have sexual rituals and political rituals and collective rituals that have been informing the biology of this species, and for the last 60 million years. So it's a very old story of mimic, of rituals, of drama, of laughing, of clapping, of sexual behavior, of orgiastic and bisexual relationships and sexual rituals. So that's very important to start with. Around 20,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, we start witnessing the beginning of a language. 70,000 years ago, 40,000 years ago, nobody knows quite precisely, but something happened that we started generating images, drawings, sculptures, and our evolutionary cultural characteristic has changed a lot, and we have been into a very evolving characteristic of this culture. The psychiatrist John Wire Perry, he described the idea of ritual dramas of renewal that seem to be a basis and a template for our psychic activity and our own biology, that our behavior and our biological cycles are organized into ritual dramas of renewal, the ritual dramas of death and rebirth. And this is a very important feature. This can be seen in Brazil with very old rituals that had been brought by enslaved Africans that were kidnapped in Africa and brought to Brazil, and managed to restore those rituals, sacrificial rituals and collective rituals and religious rituals that are very powerful in our communities and very powerful in our territory, particularly in Rio de Janeiro, from where I come, where we have a massive African descent population and a very Africanized culture, and that's a very important feature. And to remember that all those rituals have a healing function, have this function of mediating death and rebirth, as Perry has said. Also in Brazil, and also in everywhere in humanity, you can see indigenous healing rituals and collective rituals and rituals connected to agriculture and to medicine and to the development of the community. So we are talking about very old rituals and very humane and even primate rituals that have been accompanying us for millions of years. In European tradition, we can see the tradition of alchemy as Jung have studied and Marie-Louise von Franz have studied, that alchemy is a very imagetic and biological metaphor for medicine and for biology and the process of images and transformation and death and rebirth. So actually we can find healing rituals and theatrical rituals and dramatic rituals in all stories, in all traditions and communities. In modern age, we can bring our biggest pioneer and one of the key figures in the founding of medicine, of modern medicine, and the founding of neuropsychiatry, who was Jean-Martin Charcot, who was the pioneer in neurology and psychiatry and psychotherapy, and also a pioneer in the arts in the psychiatric hospital. Charcot founded a theater with 500 seats in the Salpêtrière Asylum in Paris, in psychiatric hospital, and he started ateliers for photography, for painting and sculpture, and he would perform twice a week along with the patients in the stage, along with his team would enter the stage with him, and he says he would improvise, he would dialogue and improvise with the patients as if he didn't know what was the diagnosis and what was the story of the person, and he could even do that theatrical improvisations in the stage with patients coming from the street. This has been described. A beautiful, beautiful book is Jonathan Marshall's book that is here, a picture, Performing Neurology, the Dramaturgy of Jean-Martin Charcot. It emphasizes Charcot the artist, Charcot the player, Charcot the improvisative player. We did a play here in Rio in 2023 and 2024, and where I played Charcot, and this was the story of the beginning of the young Freud, when Freud went with 29 years old to work with Charcot, and Charcot had been a striking master and a striking figure for Freud his whole life, and an inspiration for his life, and Freud was a big poet, a big writer, and he would be very, very connected to the arts. He wrote a lot about the arts, about Michelangelo, about the Moses, about Hamlet, about Macbeth. He was truly connected to the arts and culture, and he himself was a poet and a prolific writer, and he won the Goethe Prize, which is the prize for literature in Germany. And we could understand this better through this theatrical work. Another key pioneer in Europe was Hans Prinzhorn, which was an art critic, poet, singer, physician, psychiatrist, music player, singer. He would play violoncello, and he was the biggest pioneer in approaching the arts and psychiatry in modern framework, in a modern art framework, which was the beginning of this work. He published this important book that became a reference for us all in the field of cultural psychiatry and the arts. He published it in 1922, which means The Plastic Activity of the Mentally Ill, a contribution to psychology and psychopathology of formal configuration. And he made key contributions in using the work of art as a psychic document. And he writes about that in the book, that we should abandon the medical nosological tradition of classifying diseases. In other words, we should stop trying to find psychopathology and symptoms and syndromes in the plastic expression of the patients. We should emphasize improvisation, no direction, in order to foster spontaneous expression from the patient. That's a modern stance, it's a modern perspective on the field of psychiatry. And also we should work and study the expressive configuration as a graphologist would study, trying to capture the image and the gestalt and the patterns and the phenomenology of the expression and the phenomenology of the images. And that's how we work up to now in our clinical practice. So this is one of the works that opens the book from 1922 that was published in Berlin. Prince Horn worked in Heidelberg University Hospital, which is the first modern art collection for patients, of psychiatric patients. By the way, all the patients were killed by the Nazis in 1933, in the beginning of the Nazi regime that started killing psychiatric patients, and nobody opposed that. That's how the gas chambers started, and this was tolerated in German society because he was killing the mentally ill. And these are some works from the collection, which is really impressive artwork and incredible images that started with Prince Horn. In Brazil, we also had a very early pioneer, which was the first black psychiatrist in the world, Juliano Moreira, who is the founder of Brazilian psychiatry. He introduced psychotherapy. He introduced the abandonment of violence against the patients, and he was the director of the public mental health policy and the public asylum of Brazil, the first public asylum that was founded in 1852 by the Portuguese Emperor Peter II. And he was invited by the president in 1903 to assume that asylum because it was in very terrible conditions, and he stood 30 years in the work. He lived inside the asylum, and he implemented and he started psychiatric reformation in Brazil in a very early moment. He introduced workshops, he introduced psychotherapy, he introduced humanized psychiatry in a moment that nobody was talking about this. And this is a picture of him old, and he had been erased in Brazilian psychiatry. This is a story of erasures of very, very positive experiences. The erasure of neuropsychiatry, I believe, due to paradigmatic negligence and paradigmatic suppression. Another key figure in Brazilian psychiatry was Nízia da Silveira. She started working in 1944 in the same asylum where Juliano Moreira was a director, and he was a teacher of her. And she founded what is today the largest museum for art and psychiatry, the Museum of the Images of the Unconscious. And she worked in workshops. She introduced zootherapy. She introduced the living together with animals in the patients, and she observed striking therapeutic effects. And Nízia was a genius, and she developed a real revolution in psychiatry, and she's also being erased right now. She worked personally with Carl Jung in Zurich in 1957 and 1958. where she says that Jungian psychology is the method, is the way she approached the images, is how she thought about the patients, and that's the psychopathology where she developed her own work. Nise is now being worshipped in Brazil as a figure, but clearly there is no medical and scientific continuation of her work. It's a big fight for us to continue Nise da Silveira clinical practice and scientific visions, because very, very, very few physicians are involved right now. I'm one of the few young physicians that have embraced this pathway. And these are the patients of Nise, the big artists that she discovered hospitalized for decades: Emílio de Barros, Adelina Gomes in the fund, and Fernando Diniz, all geniuses that were discovered inside the public asylum of Brazil. And Nise, it's also a key reference for our work. I decided to become a psychiatrist when I knew her work in the Engenho de Dentro Asylum, where I had the opportunity, the historical opportunity of working for 7 years, of managing. I was a public manager in Rio de Janeiro Public Health Office, and I'll talk about that a bit later. Another key figure for us is Frederick Hickling, who was also a professor in McGill from Jamaica. I met him in McGill, I met him in Montreal in 2015. And Fred was the pioneer of cultural psychiatry and transcultural psychiatry in Jamaica. He was the pioneer of psychiatric reformation in Jamaica. He was a pioneer in the deinstitutionalization of the Bellevue Hospital that I'll show here. And he is one of the biggest successes in public policies and public policy for mental health in Jamaica that we have been witnessing and working with him. I visited him in Jamaica along with Jasmine and the whole group in 2020 when he passed away. And we have a big reference in his work because it's all about this. This is his last book, The Colonization of Psychiatry in Jamaica, Magnificent Irations, was the name of the spectacle pageant that he developed in the process of unbuilding the asylum in Jamaica, the main asylum, and also the method for psychohistoriography, which is a method for anamnesis, of joining memories, of constructing narrative, of constructing memories, of constructing history, and collectively, and that's how the group, we still work with that. Debbie Ann Chambers is gonna work with this with you in tomorrow in the next session, and this is a key reference. Some images from the Garden Theater that he built and the cultural therapy unities in the Bellevue Hospital with patients and workers and the whole community together, playing and dancing and using music therapy and theater therapy and sculptures. He developed a real revolution in Jamaica with cultural therapy unities inside the asylum, and he managed to unbuild that asylum in a very vibrant and revolutionary work that started in the end of the 70s and was prematurely interrupted by political changes. That's also a rule, and that's what happened to me, what happens to Prince Horn, and what happens to Nise da Silveira when the government changes, the policies discontinued. And that's a disgrace that is insistently happening with all positive experience. Even Charcot in the psychotherapy and arts had been erased. And these are some images from the Garden Theater and the community involvement and the participation of every actors and actresses. And this approach and the idea of dance therapy and sculptures in the garden and the development of collective work, of collaborative work, had been true lessons that Fred Hickling has left to us. The Garden Theater had been destroyed by the government when the political change happened, but fortunately we have the memories and the documents, and all those pictures have been taken from Fred Hickling's book, The Colonization of Psychiatry in Jamaica. And that's very important evidence and documents of what happened and how it happened, and that's how we should follow and reproduce those scientific and medical principles and the clinical results, and keep developing this important approach in cultural psychiatry and in medicine. So Fred Hickling is a major advancement. In the subsequent years, he kept working. He developed a massive projects from the Dream a World project, where he worked in 70 public schools in every in the whole island of Jamaica, and I'm sure Debbie Ann Chambers is going to talk about it because she worked with him in this project, as well Jeswant, who went to Jamaica several years and worked with him in these developments. Another key figure that's going to speak in the end of the week this week is Professor Jacques Arpin from Geneva, who is also a pioneer in theater performance and psychiatry and cultural psychiatry. And he is from Switzerland. He lives in Geneva. This is Monica Arpin, his wife. She's a Brazilian anthropologist. And this is when I visited him for the first time in 2014. And I visited his theater clinic in Geneva, where he has this stage and a consultation office in the second floor. And he developed these historical works on masters of their conditions that had been published in Transcultural Psychiatry. And that's how I found him. I found him through the literature, the scientific literature, and that's how I arrived in McGill. He referred me to Professor Kiermaier, and then I started working in Montreal. I moved to Montreal in 2015, and I could connect to all those living authors and living references of the field. And I got particularly connected to Jeswant Guzder, who helped me a lot in the process of writing and working, and we keep working in those in the last 11 years. One of my teachers that had been a key reference is Lula van der Leij. He's a physician, a psychiatrist, and a poet and an artist. And he worked 30 years along with Nízia da Silveira, and also with this amazing Brazilian artist called Lígia Clark, who is a pioneer in relational arts. She abandons the painting and starts developing relational objects. She has this a genial phrase when she said there are no art objects but relational objects. Every object of art is actually an object of relationship. And she arrived to the idea of structuring the self in 1976, which is this sensorial experience where the client and the patient and the subject experiences several relational objects. And Lula Wanderley have applied those relational objects into the clinical work with schizophrenics and severe mental illness with amazing success and amazing cases in the last 30 years, where he developed this work in the same asylum where I worked, where Nízia da Silveira worked, where Juliano Moreira worked, and he developed this clinical center called The Space Open to Time. And Lula is an artist himself. He works with generation of images, movies. He's a multi-language artist and a contemporary artist that's not fixed to the form, but he develops performances and all kinds of approaches in psychiatry. It's a very big work and encyclopedic work in our development. Vera Lúcia de Azevedo Dantas is also a physician and an artist, and she is a healer. She's an indigenous healer from Brazil, and she is also a reference for our work and is a cultural approach and transcultural medicine. And she was a founder of the Madness Hotel, which was the work I did in the asylum. And this is one of our last pictures with this group together when Jesuant was in Brazil, in São Paulo. I organized a meeting and I could gather all them. Debian Chambers too came to São Paulo, Vera Dantas, Lula Vanderlei, and also the young Vitor Nina, who is also a family physician and a psychiatrist in Belém do Pará. And he's also going to be with us on Friday along with Jacques Arpin. So we're going to be able to see a younger person continuing this kind of approach and work in Brazil. He is from the Amazon in Belém do Pará, and he was a medical student in the Madness Hotel when I started it in this public asylum in Rio. I want to pay a homage and speak some words about Jesuant Guzder, who is a leading psychiatrist and artist and transcultural psychiatrist and psychotherapist and author and thinker and philosopher. Jesuant is a polymath. She has an amazing knowledge and practice and clinical practice, and she has this whole experience that is sharing with us right now. We went to Venice to lecture together in 2019, and in 2023 I managed to organize a big meeting in Brazil, and I could bring Jesuant as a special guest and also Debian Chambers. And it was a huge success when we introduced this transcultural psychiatry approach in Brazilian medicine that is really not developed, and very few physicians in Brazil have gone through this anthropological medicine and anthropological psychiatry, which is a necessity in Brazil because we have one of the most transcultural populations, one of the most mixed populations in the world. We also spoke about Fred Hicklin, about the work of decolonization of psychiatry, and that for sure it's a big impact in Brazil that is still to flourish when we understand that those theories and paradigms in medicine and psychiatry are necessary for the kind of public health we have. And also I visited with Jesuant and we were together in 2020 along with Fred Hicklin on the right and along with Pat Newton, who was a big black psychiatrist from the United States. And they both passed away in 2020. It was big losses for our group and our team. Well, I started the Center for Culture, Science and Health in 2009 in Rio, and I went to work in the Nise da Silveira Mental Health Institute, which is the new name for the National Asylum, and we went into this big work that became the Dionise Theater. That's a picture of me playing Hamlet in the beach where we work usually, and some images from the Madness Hotel, which was a theater and performance site. And this was our way to work, and we would do big spectacles and pageants and occupation of public spaces, occupation of public squares. We would occupy the public square of the neighborhood, of the Engenho de Dentro neighborhood, and that was very important for mobilizing the community, bringing the community in. We would bring artists and everybody. As Shakespeare said, the world is a stage and every human being is an actor. And that's a real big truth that we should use it for promoting health and promoting mental health. This is Reginaldo Terra. He was a schizophrenic, hospitalized with 11 years old, and he was a key figure and a leading actor in our Madness Hotel. And he's now 77 years old, and I still follow him, and we still have the Catamineses, the long-term follow-up of this great figure. He won prizes as an actor, with movies. Was a wonderful performance, and we have a big group of patients that became actors and developed expressive skills. We would do pageants. This is me with some 29 years old, 30 years old, 17 years old ago, leading a pageant in the Madness Hotel. And the Madness Hotel was a big improvisation environment with poetry. And this was the climate. Here we have key leaders, leaders from the Madness Hotel. Miriam Rodrigues, André, and Jaci Oliveira, Pelezinho, the little Pelé in the third one. And that was an amazing environment that we could manage. And it was destroyed by the health office in the 2016 coup d'etat. They took advantage of the coup d'etat and fired me in secret. And they just unbuilt the whole project. This is our garden theater that we worked 3 times a week, rehearsing and presenting outside the hospital. And it was a permanent occupation of the psychiatric hospital. And also we used very much the language of pageantry and occupation of public spaces and occupation of the open spaces with theater. This Edu Viola, a big artist and composer that was one of the formers, a leader in the Madness Hotel. And these are the images of our work that were always in the work. This is Júnior Santos, lecturing theater in our public theater in Ipanema, where we occupied. Here we have this exceptional gathering of artists, with Ney Mato Grosso in the center of the picture, a big Brazilian singer, the big theater director Amir Haddad in yellow, and Ray Lima, a big poet, and in red in the upper part of the picture, were some of the masters that have helped us in building the Madness Hotel. We would work in assemblies. Every Friday we would have assemblies, therapeutic assemblies, where we would gather the whole community and listen to everybody. And we use it to do once a year a congress for theater and psychiatry that mobilized actors from all over the world and all over Brazil. We would receive people from every place. This is Milton Freire. He was a patient of Nízia da Silveira and also a leading actor in the Madness Hotel. He's a poet and a leader in Brazilian psychiatric reformation. And this was one of our therapeutic assemblies during the congresses of theater and psychiatry. Here we have José Pacheco, who is a leading pedagogist in Brazil. He's a Portuguese pedagogist who founded revolutionary schools everywhere in Brazil and also in Portugal, the famous Escola da Ponte, who is a public school with constructivist pedagogies and a very well succeeded experience in the last 50 years. So that's the Hamlet play that we did in 2014, and this is the Madness Yet There Is Method in It. Reginaldo Terra, who played the ghost of King Hamlet, and this had an international repercussion, and that's how I close this short presentation, and with this small video from the Hamlet production, from the time of the Hamlet production, that we could document through BBC, who came to the asylum to document the Hamlet play.
It's nearly showtime, and these thespians are busy warming up ahead of tonight's performance of Hamlet. But these performers aren't professional actors. They are patients at a psychiatric hospital in Rio. Many of the members of this theatre group suffer from mental health conditions, including severe schizophrenia and chronic psychosis. Vitor Pordeus is the actor's doctor, but is also their director and acts alongside them in the plays. He founded a collective called the Madness Hotel. He believes that this collective provides a way for his patients to explore their emotions and feelings, and says his technique cures them.
I believe that theater cures because through the debate of the relationships of the person, we can see the evolution of the person. Mental illness is characterized by isolation. Theater heals because it expands the consciousness, the emotion, the relationship to the other.
Vitor says that the success of his work can be clearly seen and has many anecdotes about dramatic effects that theatre has had on his patients.
This patient, she was introduced to me as mute. When this patient was very severe, very regressed, very chronic psychosis, schizophrenia, long-term hospitalization, she enters in the workshop and she catches the microphone and she sings.
The troupe is on its way to the beach for a sunset performance in Ipanema. The group comes here regularly to perform. Hamlet is a favourite, as Vitor says it openly explores its character's state of mind.
I really like theatre. It helps open my mind. I still get my great days, like today I'm feeling a bit down, but I'm really trying. I feel I've grown as a person.
At a basic level, these performances allow patients stimulation and interaction they would otherwise not get. But Vitor is adamant his work heals and changes lives on a level that science doesn't yet understand. Ben Taverner, BBC World News, Rio de Janeiro.
Eu sou poderoso, rei de uma rainha adúltera.
And this is the continuation of my work. I returned from Canada in 2018. I spent from 2015 to 2018 in McGill in the division, working with Jasmine, Dolores Kiermaier, with Jacques Arpin, with Fred Hickling, and so this was very important to me to meet the living references of my field. And we keep doing the public rituals with theatrical performances. I do a lot of medical consultations and family therapy and individual psychotherapy. I also see patients in their houses, in their homes. I do a lot of visitations in my clinic, and I like to see the patients and the families in their houses. This helps a lot. It's a big advantage in semiology. We also have a significant number of clients in sports, in sports psychiatry, and in swimming, and in CrossFit, and in football in Brazil, because I'm very connected to the sports. I swim and I train CrossFit. We also have this front with cannabis oil, which is very useful in the clinical work. And we have psychopathology and epigenetics courses, actors workshops, and clinical meetings for transcultural formation and development of transcultural psychiatrists, new transcultural psychiatrists. These are some of the links where you can find and review my work and see the movies in the YouTube channel, in the Instagram. Also, I publish a lot, and I keep publishing, and I keep documenting and publishing my work in the last 17 years. And also my papers here in the academia.edu, where I have more than 100 papers published since my time from immunology research that I did, and I still work in immunology and clinical immunology, and also in psychiatry, and also the theatrical work. It's all written and published. So that's it. Thank you very much, and I'll be very glad to hear questions.